Osiris and Isis were the golden couple, top of the top, the perfect couple. Let's ignore their mythological origin of being siblings. All gods do the incest thing. The important thing is that they were happy together until Osiris died and was confined to the underworld for the rest of eternity, seemingly separated from the living world and his love. However, in tomb art, they rarely appear separated for long, as both Isis and their sister Nephthys are depicted standing behind the Lord of the Underworld. In this case, these gods are fortunate. They can see each other, even if they cannot have more children. The most heartbreaking moment I felt for a Goa'uld was when Osiris was revealed to have lost Isis's canopic jar to breakage, meaning Osiris would have to face the rest of time alone. My name is Renee. You're listening to Detours in Archaeology, and this is The Death of Love. Happy Valentine's Day. Delayed Valentine's Day. For the Lord of the Underworld, obviously, love doesn't actually die. Even if it did, the paintings and texts depict an afterlife in which anything desired is available. So it could literally be anything the ancient Egyptians wanted. So why would they separate their best ship? But Stargate did. Before examining the revised versions, let's discuss the original stories. We've gone over multiple stories in which Osiris takes part, especially the origin of his rebirth and the invention of the process of mummification. However, to discuss the myths of one needs to connect the two characters. For some background, let's discuss name etymologies first. Osiris is a Greek Latinized form of the Egyptian name Usir, Wesir, or Asar, also spelled Asar. However, the closest approximation to Osiris's name in ancient Egyptian is the unpronounceable form JSJRT. It is commonly interpreted as the epithet Mighty One, although its actual meaning is uncertain. According to Geraldine Pinch, an Egyptologist at the Oriental Institute of Oxford University, who I'll be citing a lot within the article or this episode, is often attributed to him and may allude to his role as death personified. The name has also been said to mean powerful, seat of the eye, or product of the eye, derived from STJRT, linking to myths about the Eye of Horus, as well as being reconstructed from hieroglyphs to have been pronounced Us-iri, meaning throne of the eye, and survives into the Coptic language as Usiri. As the Egyptian god of the afterlife, death, resurrection, and agriculture, the name signifies the judge of the dead and represents eternal life and fertility. As we can already see, the meaning of the name is inseparable from Osiris's role as the Egyptian god of the afterlife, and the ideas of what his name was became the linguistic and symbolic map of his divine functions. However, this may be a consequence of the Egyptologists knowing what Osiris's role is and his epithets and working backwards to create a realistic explanation. Based on his most important myth, his resurrection embodies the deity who was slain and subsequently revived, making his name a powerful symbol of rebirth and renewal. He was also believed to govern the flooding of the Nile, effectively linking his name to agriculture and the cycles of growth. Furthermore, he bears the title of the Inert One, Lord of Silence, and Merciful Judge, which represents the just and peaceful transition of souls to the underworld and reflects his roles in both judgment and mercy. The most common translation of Wasir, of WSJR, is the powerful or the mighty one, stemming from the roots Wasir, WSR. This title highlights the supreme authority over death, signifying his role as the mighty one, who has the power to grant eternal life to the deceased. His influence extends beyond the physical world to moral authority. He is called the Lord of Power because he renders the final judgment in the Hall of Truth, where he determines each soul's fate. For a hieroglyphic connection, the throne and eye, this interpretation is based on the two primary hieroglyphs used to write his name, the throne, ST, and the eye, JR, which can be translated as he who sees the throne or he who takes his seat. The throne represents his authority as Egypt's first king and his continuous reign in the underworld, symbolizing the stability, Jed, which is the pillar, he provides to the cosmos. The eye signifies his omniscience and healing abilities, illustrating his capacity to perceive the truth during judgment. In myth, the Eye of Horus was used to revive Osiris, making the eye a lasting symbol of his resurrection and healing. I'm not really sure how the Eye of Horus would have been used to revive Osiris, because Horus may not have been born yet, or he may have been. Depends on the version. And why would Isis take out the eye of her son? Maybe it was the Eye of Horus the Elder rather than Horus the Younger. Listen to my episode about Harrower to learn more about Horus the Elder. Or just look it up online. Either way. But beyond his formal name, Osiris was known as the epithets that linked him to the land's physical health. Wenifer, translating to the beautiful or eternally good one, reflects his role in the Nile's annual flood, which brought about beauty and life back to the parched earth. KMJ, WER, and Wajwer mean the Great Black, the fertile silt of the Nile, and the Great Green, new plant growth, respectively, and directly associate him with the agricultural cycle of death in winter and rebirth in spring, at least the versions of it in Egypt. These titles also connect to his iconography, as he is most often depicted with green skin. When his skin is blue, it's most often a connection to being dead. The connection between the name and the role was so profound that every deceased Egyptian had Osiris added to their name, such as the Osiris Ani. This ritual was thought to connect the individual with divine power, allowing him to participate in the divine resurrection and to aid his transition to the afterlife. Concerning the mummification product, some scholars regard it as a product or something made, specifically referring to Osiris as the first being successfully mummified, often depicted as a generally mummified figure. In addition, one of Osiris's epithets, foremost of the Westerners, originated with Khentimentiu of Abydos, a funerary deity whom Osiris ultimately replaced, but more on that later. The story of Osiris is unique among Egyptian gods because, unlike many deities who were considered fully formed from the start, Osiris generally developed from a mysterious local figure into one of the most important religious figures in the Nile Valley. As for his development, the origins of this can be traced back to the pyramid text from the 5th dynasty in the Old Kingdom, roughly 2494 to 2345 BCE. These are the earliest known religious writings on which Osiris is first portrayed as a deceased king who has been revived. Initially, he was not universally worshipped as a god, but was primarily regarded as a divine figure associated with the pharaoh. During this period, two rival religious concepts existed: the solar cult, which was focused on Ra, the sun god, and the Osirian cult. Ra symbolized the living king, while Osiris represented the deceased ruler. Over time, these beliefs combined, leading to the view of the pharaoh as Ra in the sky during the day and Osiris in the underworld at night. The next major change occurred during the Middle Kingdom, roughly 2055 to 1650 BCE, a period marked by political chaos and unrest, especially after the First Intermediate Period. This era was crucial to establishing Osiris as a god for everybody, not just of kings. The monopoly over the afterlife was broken, and ordinary people believed that they too could become an Osiris after death. The city of Abydos became the living pilgrimage site for many followers of Osiris, and Egyptians traveled there to participate in mysterious rituals known as mystery plays, which reenacted Osiris's death and rebirth. During this period, the concept of a post-mortem moral judgment also became central. To enter Osiris's kingdom, a person no longer needed only a grand tomb, they also had to have a pure heart, symbolizing their moral integrity. As Egypt grew into a powerful empire during the New Kingdom, from around 1550 to 1070 BCE, the stories about Osiris became more detailed and standardized. The myth of the Osirian triad, Osiris, his wife Isis, and their son Horus, became more fully developed. The story in which Seth murders Osiris, Isis gathers his broken body parts, and Horus seeks revenge became a key national myth. This period also saw the creation of the famous Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and guides inscribed on papyrus scrolls. These texts helped the deceased navigate the dangerous underworld and achieve a peaceful afterlife with Osiris. Finally, during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods from 332 BCE to 395 CE, Osiris's influence extended beyond Egypt's borders. Through a process of syncretism with the Greek deities, Osiris appeared as Serapis, a deity revered throughout the Mediterranean kingdom, who we'll talk more about later, and the themes associated with Osiris, being murdered, resurrected, and offered eternal life, also serve as a foundation for Christianity's rise in Egypt. The story about death and rebirth deity who grants everlasting life became a familiar pattern that influenced new religious beliefs at the time. But he had certain symbolic regalia. Beyond the mummified appearance and his dark skin, Osiris has other symbolic features that indicate his identity in art. 1. His pharaonic features. Obviously, he is represented as a pharaoh and is often shown wearing the pharaoh's beard, which many scholars interpret as a penis, which is why Hatshepsut has one on her statues, even though she was a queen, but she was also pharaoh. He's also wearing the Atef crown, his primary headgear, which resembles the white crown of Upper Egypt, but includes 2 curling ostrich feathers, and he is also holding the crook and flail. The crook is a symbol believed to represent Osiris's role as a shepherd god, and the flail is a little bit more uncertain. Suggestions have included a shepherd's whip, a fly whisk, or a connection to the god Anjeti.
Turning over to Isis, she was a prominent goddess in ancient Egypt, celebrated for her association with magic, motherhood, healing, fertility, and protection. Her original Egyptian name was either Aset or Eset, literally meaning throne, symbolizing her role as the divine seat of the pharaoh's authority. The name of this deity has several important aspects. Its symbol is the throne hieroglyph, which she often wears as a headdress, demonstrating her connection to kingship and her role as a divine ruler. The phrase, she of the throne or queen of the throne, also reflects her status, with some scholars suggesting that she originally represented the actual royal seat before becoming a major goddess. Many Egyptologists believe that because the king's authority was symbolized by sitting on the throne itself was regarded as the mother of the king, as a divine lap. Over time, this abstract concept developed into a divine maternal figure. Evidence from language and early texts suggests that her worship probably began in the Nile Delta region of Lower Egypt, as opposed to the Osiris Upper Egypt crown, near sites like Belbit el-Hagar. Initially worshipped as a local deity, her influence gradually expanded across Egypt, eventually becoming a major goddess worshipped nationwide. The name, of course, has evolved over time. In Egyptian, it is thought to be Aset, Eset, Iset, or Uset. In Coptic, it is Esse or Essi, and in Greek, it's Isis. which became widely recognized internationally through the Greek rendering of the Egyptian name. When the Greeks came into contact with Egyptian culture, particularly after Alexander the Great's conquest in 332 BCE, they adapted Egyptian names to conform to their own language and grammar. In Greek, nouns often need specific endings, like is or s, to be grammatically correct within sentences. The original Egyptian pronunciation was probably closer to uset or eset, but since hieroglyphs largely do not indicate vowels, the Greeks inserted vowels that sounded natural to them, resulting in the name Isis. She was also called the goddess of 10,000 names because she absorbed the qualities of nearly all other Egyptian goddesses, symbolizing motherhood and universality. Beyond her name, she was highly revered as the Great Lady of Magic, an ideal mother figure as the mother of Horus, and the protector of the dead, renowned for reviving her husband Osiris. One of her most famous stories involves reassembling her dismembered husband and bringing him back to life as ruler of the underworld and conceiving their son, Horus, who seeks justice for him. Overall, Isis embodies maternal love, magical power, and sovereignty, securing her status as one of Egypt's most beloved goddesses. Because Greeks and Romans recorded their history and religious beliefs extensively, their versions of Egyptian gods' names became the most widely recognized worldwide, as worship of Isis spread not only in Egypt, but throughout the Greco-Roman world, making her one of the most widely venerated deities of antiquity. While ancient Egyptians continued to call her Aset, the name Isis became common throughout the Mediterranean as her worship spread through Greece, Rome, and eventually across Europe. The Greeks employed a practice known as interpretatio Graeca, which involved understanding foreign gods by equating them with their own deities. Initially, they identified Aset with Demeter, the goddess of harvest and motherhood, and over time, they continued to use the name Isis because she grew in popularity and was seen as a universal goddess, worshipped beyond her original Egyptian roots. The iconography of Isis typically depicts her as a woman wearing a throne-shaped headdress, symbolizing her sovereignty, sometimes adorned with cow horns and a sun disk, details borrowed from Hathor, and sometimes with outstretched wings. Isis first appeared as a distinct deity during the Old Kingdom, 2686 to 2181 BCE. Her earliest known references appear in the pyramid texts, inscribed on the tomb of Pharaoh Unas, the last ruler of the 5th dynasty, dating to around 2494 to 2345 BCE. While gods such as Ra and Horus have origins dating to Egypt pre-dynastic period, before 3100 BCE, the specific name Aset appears from the 5th dynasty onward, suggesting that her prominence rose during this era. In these sacred texts, Isis was already portrayed as a key figure in the myth of Osiris, acting as a protector and supporter of the deceased king. During the Old Kingdom, Aset was primarily associated with a simple yet powerful symbol, the hieroglyphic throne she wore as a headdress. She is usually depicted wearing a basic sheath dress, which symbolized her role as a seat of authority that validated the king's rule. At this time, her role was primarily supportive. She was regarded as a key figure alongside Osiris, and served as the chief mourner and protector of the deceased king in funerary texts. She was a minor yet important figure associated with mourning in royal funerals. She was not yet widely worshipped by the general public, remaining a more reserved divine figure. By the New Kingdom, 1550 to 1070 BCE, Isis's image grew more dramatic and inclusive, absorbing the characteristics of other goddesses, especially Hathor, by adopting the iconic cow horns and solar headdress. This transformed her into a more significant mother goddess for all people, not just the pharaohs. She was also frequently depicted wearing a crown shaped like a vulture and a royal uraeus, the rearing cobra, on her forehead. These elements signified her royal role and divine authority, thereby emphasizing her position as the divine queen. Additionally, images in temples and on statues depicted Isis nursing her son Horus, or the divine iteration of the pharaoh, symbolizing her nurturing nature. Her milk was considered a powerful symbol of a king's divine right to rule, but also, as her importance grew, her images became more elaborate, featuring royal and divine attire and accessories. Another common representation shows Isis with the outstretched wings of a kite, a bird of prey. This winged form represented her role in searching for and protecting souls of the deceased, highlighting her protective and guiding qualities. This period also saw the rise of the Tiet, or the Isis knot, a protective amulet fashioned from red stone, glass, or faience, symbolizing the protective power and the blood of the goddess Isis. It was frequently placed on mummy necks from the New Kingdom onward to ensure safe passage in the afterlife, symbolizing her protective magical powers and her bloodline. Her reputation expanded dramatically during this time, as she was recognized as the goddess of powerful magic, or Rowet Hekau, and became a protector of the sun god Ra. Moreover, Isis's influence extended beyond royalty, making her a healing goddess worshipped by all Egyptians. Isis's images conveyed her multifaceted role in Egyptian religion and her significance as a divine figure in their culture through these various symbols. During the Ptolemaic period, from 332 to 30 BCE, Isis reached the peak of her worship as Egypt's leading deity, like with Cleopatra VII embodying the goddess Isis and Mark Antony embodying Osiris. The construction of grand temples like the renowned temple at Philae, dedicated solely to her, marked her as a central figure in the Egyptian religion during this era, which, if you remember from the last episode, is still one of the most complete and well-maintained temples that are still standing, even though technically it is on a different island now. Philae, the island Philae, was actually drowned when the Aswan Dam was built. But I digress. Finally, in the Roman period, beginning around 30 BCE, Aset's influence, or really Isis by this point, reached an international level. Her image was often merged with other cultural symbols, as in depictions such as Isis Fortuna, holding a rudder and a cornucopia, or Isis Thermatis with a serpent's tail. In Rome, her cult adopted a signature symbol, the Isiac knot, tied between her breasts, and she was often shown holding a sistrum, a musical rattle. This is when her status was elevated to that of Goddess of 10,000 Names, a universal deity overseeing fate and natural forces, along with other names. Her worship extended beyond Egypt, reaching Britain and Germany, reflecting the status as a, especially at the time, truly global goddess. Isis played an important role, assuming various forms and functions. Originally associated with funerary practices, she later became known as the powerful protector of the nation. People believe that she was even more effective in battle than millions of soldiers combined, and she was often shown supporting rulers by helping them defeat their enemies. This made her a symbol of strength in addition to protection. She was also famous for her magical abilities. People called her more clever than a million gods because her magic was reputed to be so strong that she could outsmart her rivals like the god Set. She was even believed to have the power to compel the mighty sun god Ra to reveal his secret name, a sign of great magical mastery, which I'll go into a little bit later in the myths section. As she was worshipped throughout the Mediterranean region or Roman world, people saw her as the universal goddess who ruled over fate and the destiny of all beings. She was also regarded as a giver of rain and fertility, essential for the growth of crops in the natural world, which helped to expand her role from a local goddess to a divine figure associated with the natural forces that sustain life. The origins for these two deities are a little bit simpler, as both characters belong to the same family. Osiris and Isis were the dual roles of brother and sister and husband and wife, making incest not only something completely okay, but actually something to strive for among the Egyptian royalty. They were also parents of Horus and the son and daughter of Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky. They were either 2 of 4 siblings or 2 of 5, depending on whether Horus the Elder is included. Osiris and Isis' son together would of course be Horus the Younger, if Horus the Elder is. Anubis, as the son of Osiris and Nephthys, was particularly recorded in myths that solidified during the Middle Kingdom, 2055 to 1650 BCE. While earlier Old Kingdom texts sometimes associated him with Ra or Bastet. The shift in theological focus during the Middle Kingdom saw Osiris rise as Lord of the Dead, making him the father of Anubis. Set's wife Nephthys, who was afraid of Set's wrath and likely attracted by Osiris' beauty back when he was alive, disguised herself as Isis and seduced the great king, becoming pregnant with the god Anubis. Though this does paint them both in a bad light, as Nephthys was obviously showing herself to be someone else, but also makes Osiris kind of look like a bit of a douche. The douche part comes in when he leaves Nephthys to face Set alone, as I don't know any myths about Osiris defending her. Although that is a whole can of worms to open about a act of sexual assault. The myths of connection between Osiris and Isis start in the Old Kingdom, where they are central figures in a myth where Isis revives her slain brother and husband. She also oversees her own birth and the safeguarding of his son/successor Horus. It was believed that Isis aided the deceased in entering the afterlife, just as she did with Osiris, and she is regarded as the divine mother of the pharaoh, who is often associated with Horus. It's actually unclear if Isis was featured in the earliest myths regarding Osiris and Horus, and at major cult centers like Abydos, her role remained marginal until the New Kingdom. But by that era, Isis was fully integrated into the true divine family alongside Osiris and Horus. Even in the earliest Osiris myth in the pyramid text, her role is her searching across Egypt for the body of Osiris after he was killed by his brother Set, and she is credited with the reassembling of Osiris' scattered bones and using spells to save his body from putrefaction, and in some versions, with the help of Anubis. Also, along with her sister Nephthys, she became a mythological prototype for all mourners. The New Kingdom hymns highlight her use of spoken magic to protect Osiris' body and to drive away Set. She is depicted as having the power to produce life without an active partner, either by stimulating the inertness of the deceased Osiris to conceive Horus, or according to the coffin text, by a flash of divine fire. After a lengthy pregnancy of about 10 months, she gave birth to Horus, often called Horus, son of Isis, to distinguish him from other deities. As the protector of Horus, she hid him in the marshes of Chemmis or Chimmis, sometimes linked to the ancient city of Chimnis, modern Akhmim, in Upper Egypt. However, the actual sacred site in Egyptian tradition is situated in the Nile Delta of Lower Egypt and served as a refuge protecting Horus from Set. I'm not sure if this is actually reflected in mythology, at least recorded, but I really like that Osiris has the crown of Upper Egypt, and even with the throne, Isis, especially where she's from, is Lower Egypt. So it's really bringing the two parts of Egypt together, which is what happened in the Old Kingdom, even if it was hundreds of years before their mythology really got started. Symbolism. She raised him there to prepare him to seek revenge for his father. The site is often described as a floating island capable of moving to hide from Set, or as a dense papyrus marsh near the ancient city of Buto. That might be why it was totally fine for them to move the Temple of Philae from the island of Philae to a neighboring island. as it just jumped from one to another. The location's religious importance includes its association with the god Min and the presence of the temple dedicated to Horus of Chemmis, or Harkabis. Symbolically, the area appears as a dangerous, thick, and inaccessible thicket representing protection from threats for the young god. In the narrative of the contendings of Horus and Set, Isis is portrayed as a figure torn between love and kinship, intervening in their battles, sometimes in the form of a hippopotamus to influence the outcome. Going back to the beginning, with the myth of Set burying his brother alive, Set was jealous of Osiris and all his power, and decided to remove his brother and commissioned a magnificent casket, the most beautiful chest ever to be made, crafted to Osiris's exact measurements. He held a grand feast to which Osiris was of course invited, and after the banquet, he told the guests he had a special surprise. He revealed the casket and declared that whomsoever fit inside it most perfectly could take it home. One by one, the guests tried to fit into the casket, but failed until it was Osiris's turn. He lay down in the casket and found it fit him perfectly. Set then slammed the lid shut and threw the casket into the Nile River. In some versions of the story, Osiris is murdered by Set and 72 accomplices, whereas in others, he alone is responsible. Another variation is that sometimes Set is said to have murdered Osiris in the casket and then disposed of it, whereas in others, Osiris suffocates after being thrown into the river or after the casket is encased by the tree at Byblos. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The casket containing Osiris's body floated down the Nile and out to sea, ultimately reaching the shores of Byblos in Phoenicia, where it became lodged in a tamarisk tree. The tree grew rapidly around it, encasing the casket, and Osiris was lost to the people of Egypt. In time, the king and queen of Byblos arrived at the shore, noticed the tree's beauty and its sweet scent, and ordered it to be cut down and brought to their court as a central pillar. Back in Egypt, Set had assumed the throne, and the harmonious balance maintained by Osiris and Isis was lost. Sounds a lot like Lion King, too. Repeating stories. Set was a chaotic and unpredictable ruler who brought storms and droughts, and the people turned against one another in their struggle for survival. Following this, Isis searched for her missing husband and eventually arrived at Byblos, where she endeared herself to the king and queen and became a nursemaid to their young sons. As was usual when Isis mingled with humans, she was disguised as an elderly woman, and no one at court recognized that they were dealing with the goddess. Isis grew fond of the younger son, Dictys, and attempted to make him immortal by burning away his moral qualities in a magical fire. One night, though, when the queen interrupted Isis during this ritual, she was horrified and screamed, startling Isis, who then threw off her disguise and revealed her true identity. The king and queen were terrified and promised her anything if she would just spare them. Isis requested the tamarisk pillar, which they quickly gave to her. She freed Osiris from the tree and brought him back to Egypt, where she hid his body in the marshes of the Nile Delta while she gathered herbs to revive him. Worried that Set might discover the body, she asked her sister Nephthys to keep watch. Set heard that Osiris had returned to Egypt and went searching for him. He found Nephthys and tricked her into revealing where the body was hidden. Set then hacked the body into pieces and flung the parts all across the land and into the river. When Isis returned with her herbs, a tearful Nephthys told her what had happened, and together they went looking for the body parts to reassemble them. Once Isis had found the pieces and put Osiris back together, she found that he was still incomplete. His penis had been eaten by the Oxyrhynchus fish and could not be recovered. Isis was still able to bring her husband back to life, sort of, but because Osiris was incomplete, he could no longer rule over the living and had to descend to the underworld. Isis transformed herself into a kite, or a falcon, and flew around his body, drawing his seed into herself and becoming pregnant with the god Horus the Younger. Osiris then journeyed to the underworld, where he became the Lord of the Dead and the Judge of Souls. Another version allows Isis in her falcon or kite form to locate Osiris's member, and through magic, it's hard, and she can impregnate herself with the piece, more literally, which led to the birth of Horus, which explains why he has a falcon head, since she did it while she was a falcon. The next part of the story is Osiris in the underworld. In the underworld, known as the Duat, Osiris also takes on the role of Judge of the Dead. Upon his soul's arrival in the afterlife, it is brought before Osiris and the other 42 gods in a ritual that involved weighing the heart against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and justice. If the heart, which housed the individual's moral substance, weighed less than a feather, it indicated a life lived in accordance with Ma'at, allowing the soul to pass into the afterlife. Firstly, if it weighed more, the soul was devoured by Amuts or Amuts, a fearsome creature that was head of a crocodile, mane and front legs of a lion, and a hippopotamus rear end and back legs, which is the picture that is my podcast icon. This myth is, of course, highlighting the importance of ethical living and moral order in ancient Egyptian culture, with the need to reach the afterlife. Though that doesn't always go as morally in the art, and we'll talk about that when we get to Anubis' episode. Another portion of his myths is that Osiris is intimately linked with Egypt's Nile River and its farming cycles. His death and resurrection represent the yearly flooding and receding of the Nile, which revitalized the land, leading to his celebrations, which I talked more about last time, with having to do with Sokar as well in his seasonal festival. This part of the myth exemplifies how Egyptians saw the farming cycle as mirroring Osiris's seasonal death and rebirth. The land's fertility was closely tied to rituals honoring Osiris, like the Osirian festival, emphasizing his importance in both the afterlife and agricultural prosperity. But how does Isis fill her time? Well, specific spells in the pyramid text actually have her mentioned. Aset, or Isis, appears over 80 times in these early inscriptions. Key spells, called the utterances, include Utterance 217, one of the earliest lists of the Ennead, the 9 primary gods. It commands Osiris and Aset to hurry and announce to the gods of the north that the king has arrived as an imperishable spirit. Utterance 219 explicitly addresses her relationship to Osiris, saying, Aset, this your brother is here, Osiris, whom you have preserved alive. He lives! Utterance 222 describes Aset praising the king and identifies her as a source of protection, stating that, fortunate is he whom Aset praises. Utterance 609 links her to the birth of the king, Horus, at Chemis, a marshy location in the Delta. And the last one I have listed, Utterance 632, is a famously dramatic passage describing how she finds her murdered husband. It states, Thy sister comes to thee, rejoicing for love of thee, she has found him. So we actually get to hear some of the translations of the actual text where all these stories come from. According to Geraldine Pinch in Egyptian mythology, the passages about Isis portray her as a central figure characterized by unselfish love, whose role and importance evolved considerably over time. Although the Delta region is, her ancient home, her most famous temple is at Philae in the far south of Egypt, so the Upper Egypt, even though her origins and worship centers are actually in the Nile Delta of Lower Egypt, so northern Egypt. Perhaps for the reason of bringing her closer to her husband in Upper Egypt. One of the main sites dedicated to her in the Nile Delta is, as I said, Beit el Hagar, also known as the ancient Isium. This location is situated in the 12th nome of Lower Egypt and is considered her primary sanctuary in the Delta. The site once housed a huge temple made entirely of granite, which was a rare and expensive material. The choice of such a durable and costly stone showed just how important she was to the ancient Egyptians. Another significant place linked to her is Sebennytos. Early texts and inscriptions suggest that she had a close connection to this area. In the pyramid texts, which are some of the oldest religious writings from Egypt, she and Osiris are frequently mentioned as working together to proclaim the resurrection of the king, especially in the Delta region. Meanwhile, in Upper Egypt, the gods Set and Nephthys are more often associated with the same role. This division reflects the regional differences in their worship and mythological stories. Her connection to water also ties back to her Delta roots. It's believed that her origins in this fertile and flood-prone region influenced her later role as Mistress of the Inundation, a title that highlights her association with the annual flooding of the Nile, again tying to Osiris as well. Ancient Egyptians thought that the Nile's floodwaters were caused by the tears of the goddess Set, who wept for her murdered brother-husband Osiris, as one of the mourners. This story emphasizes her deep links to the water, fertility, and the life-giving aspects of the Nile. Whenever she would have to leave Horus temporarily, various goddesses like Hathor stepped in to care for and protect the child, which does play into why Hathor is often featured in the mythology around Isis and Horus, and why sometimes Hathor is the mother of Horus. Many magical texts also describe her mourning her child's poisoning, often caused by a serpent bite, emphasizing her deep maternal concern and involvement in healing magic. As an advisor and strategist, she guided Horus through dangerous situations. For example, when Set made sexual advances towards Horus, Isis advised her son to demand part of Set's magical strength in exchange, a tactic to weaken their foe. She also instructed Horus to catch Set's semen in his fingers rather than
let himself be, quote-unquote, contaminated,
thereby protecting himself and gathering evidence. Another clever plan involves spreading Horus's semen on lettuce, Set's favorite food, in Set's garden. After Set ate it, he unwittingly became pregnant with Horus's divine power, which appeared as a radiant disk symbolizing Horus's rightful inheritance. As a healer and creator, Isis demonstrated her divine skills by restoring Horus's severed hand after Set's interference. In a significant ritual, she used her own hand to help Horus produce semen, kind of gross, acting as the divine hand goddess, a role traditionally associated with assisting in the creation of life, which Hathor represented in earlier stories. This act underscored her status as a goddess of life and renewal. The myth involving the removal of Horus's eyes reveals a dark aspect of her story. In some versions, Horus, enraged over Isis's mercy towards Set, viciously mutilates her by cutting off her head. Set then punishes Horus for this act by ripping out both of his eyes and burying them on a mountainside, where they supposedly grow into lotuses. Following this violent event, the healing powers of other gods come into play. Thoth heals Isis by replacing her severed head with that of a cow, again, kind of connecting to Hathor, and some traditions attribute the restoration of Horus's eye to Hathor or Isis herself, with Thoth also playing a healing role. Isis also played a part in the ongoing divine conflicts described in Egyptian mythology. During the battles between Horus and Set, she intervened using magical weapons, such as a harpoon, against Set. But despite her efforts, she ultimately chose to spare Set when he pleaded for mercy, recognizing their kinship ties. They were brother and sister. These stories highlight her as both a strategic thinker and a compassionate protector. One of the biggest ways that she used her magic was in learning Ra's true name. The myth starts with Ra, the sun god known for his great wisdom and strength. But as he grows older, he begins to feel his power diminished and he goes a bit senile, which worries the other gods. To protect Ra, and themselves, let's be honest, they decide to monitor him. Isis, admired for her intelligence and magical skills, is curious to learn Ra's true name, because knowing a god's real name can give someone control over him, which is a trope that continued for thousands of years in folklore and just signing contracts. So, Isis crafts a plan. She creates a poisonous snake that bites Ra while he's resting. The bite causes Ra intense pain, and as he cries out, he calls on the other gods to help him. But despite their efforts, they can't heal his wound. That's when Isis comes forward, maybe pretending to care about Ra's well-being, maybe genuinely caring, and she offers to assist him. As part of her plan, Isis speaks with Ra and gently persuades him to share his true name, which would give her full strength to ensure his survival. He eventually tells her, and she does ensure his survival. Whether she actually needed his true name or not, who can say? But once Isis knows Ra's real name, she gains the power over him, illustrating how knowledge can be the greatest source of power. This myth, of course, underscoring the importance of knowledge, particularly understanding names in the ancient Egyptian religion, and highlights Isis's power to influence events. Ra's trust in Isis shows a vulnerability among gods. By gaining Ra's true name, Isis boosts her authority and reinforces her role as protector and continuing to present her as a healer as well as the mother and goddess.
Thank you so much for listening to part 1 of Osiris and Isis, the death of love. Come back in 3 weeks for part 2, or whenever the next one will be when you're listening to this. This is another 2-parter episode just because there was so much to get through and I only really have an hour, even less.
While I could have divided this in half by Osiris and Isis just separately, they are the golden couple, so I felt like I needed to keep my ship together. You're so cute. Hopefully I made this as coherent as possible. I appreciate your patience in waiting to get to the Stargate stuff.
I will be giving more of my thoughts and feelings at the end of the second part, but I really am glad that we kept these gods around for so long in the way that they were, and that they still affect a lot of pop culture today. This was a very Isis-heavy episode, and admittedly, the next part will also be a lot of Isis mythology, but that's because she has so much more than Osiris does. So thank you for bearing with me going into both of them at once. If you liked this, please write a review, please rate it, and leave a comment. Human engagement is the best way that more people can find my podcast in the future. Head over to the website to read about and follow along with the text of this document. See all the beautiful images that I included with it and the references at the end for all my citations. I would like to make a formal apology for my pronunciation of all the Egyptian words, most of which, in case you're not aware, are written without vowels most of the time. So I'm just trying to make an educated guess, and probably some English words as well. I swear I am trying, but I am not very good at it. If you know of any corrections or you have more information or any questions, feel free to email me directly at detoursandarchaeology@gmail.com, or you can contact me really anywhere.
Sorry, the audio was a bit shaky. I had to record on the road and back in my little studio. So, thanks for your patience with the audio quality and everything else.
If you would like to support me in any monetary way, you can join my Patreon at a higher level than the free, which it is normally, or you can head over to my Printify shop where I have shirts, stickers, mugs,
Various other objects.
and some of my works of art that I'm selling. And I'm also open for commissions. Just email me directly at detoursinarchaeology@gmail.com, or hit the contact link on my website to let me know what I can do, and we can discuss options if you want anything personalized. You can also follow me on Instagram, on Blue Sky, but I recommend following this podcast and checking out their direct website. I am on the Archaeology Podcast Network, so if you are new and listening to this for the first time, welcome. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it if you've listened to all of my episodes already. All the music comes from Scott Buckley, who can be found at scottbuckley.com.au.
For the interesting fact this week, I'm going to be talking about the 4 deepest caves in the world that are all found in the same region by Darren Orff on interestingfacts.com. In the Western Caucasus Mountains, where Europe meets Asia, is a hidden geological wonder. Thousands of feet below the limestone surface, enormous caves stretch out like hollow roots of a gigantic tree. Called the Arabica Massif, this area is home to the 4 deepest caves in the world, including the deepest, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Varyovkina, which the very deepest. Would-be spelunkers may have to use their imagination, though. The mountain terrain is less than hospitable, and the caves themselves are located in fraught political territory. All are within the borders of Abkhazia, a breakaway state recognized by much of the world as part of Georgia, but with increasing ties to Russia. The location of Arabica Massif's limestone, its thickness, and its gentle slope towards the Black Sea create perfect conditions for these huge caves to form, and the world record holder isn't set in stone, pun intended. It was only in 2018 that speleologists, cave scientists, discovered that Varyovkina was actually deeper, at 7,257 feet than its rival Krubera, roughly 7,215 feet. Varyovkina may not hold on to its record forever, though, as cave scientists plunge even deeper into the world's caves in search of unknown species and the secrets of Earth's geologic past. Yet, based on its current rankings, it seems like a fair bet that the deepest cave crown won't leave the mountains of Abkhazia anytime soon. But just so you know, that if you do go into caves, many of those animals, if you see any animals, they might not have eyes. Vision is useless in most cave environments because sunlight can't penetrate into the depths of the natural rocky fortresses. Evolution has thus slowly eliminated vision from many animals living in caves, sometimes by completely removing their eyes. For example, a variety of the blind cave fish, native to Mexico, evolved to lose its eyeballs after leaving open waters for the comfort of limestone caves. Instead, these fish see
by sucking in water and sensing the magnitude of the pressure changes as the water flows around them and surrounding objects. Other animals, like some amphibians, spiders, and scorpions, have similarly lost their vision as they've adapted to the gloomy interiors of their lightless world.
If you have any ideas on interesting facts that are true, you can also email that to me or comment or direct message me on Instagram. Either way, I'll get it. No worries. And then I can give you credit if you want. So of course, next time is part 2 of Osiris and Isis. And in the future, coming down the pipe, I will regale you with some history about Portugal and its changing history of the Art Nouveau movement. It seems a lot older than actual Art Nouveau. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep taking those detours. Thanks.